Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of You Gotta Meet, where I get the chance to be able to dive into meaningful conversations with incredible leaders within their own respective industry. And today I am joined by Vice President of Locums at Signet Locums, Mr. Alan Ashby. Now, you will soon learn a lot about this incredible guy as he has agreed to show authentic leadership in action by choosing to go a little deeper and embrace the human connections we all should at work and in life. So, ladies and gentlemen, you got to meet Alan Ashby. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. Glad to be here, and I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, you know what? It's like I feel sometimes where I got to be careful to not go into performer mode when I'm introducing my own guests, right? I was like, it's almost like I feel at the end of it, I should say, "Are you ready to rumble?"
Oh yeah,
You come in,
jock jams in the background.
yeah, that's right. The music's playing and everything. So thanks for being here. And for those who are watching for the very first time, I get to have these fun conversations about meaningful topics that go above and beyond just the typical conversation around work. For sure, work comes up, and that's a big part of our lives. But we also want to jump into other conversations just about life and what the heck's going on there outside those work doors. And so to get things started without any type of more distraction, I want to dive right into it. So you're vice president. You know, you've got a pretty big job. You've got a pretty cool resume, and I know you've had some pretty amazing leadership positions in other organizations. But let's backtrack right when you were a kid. Okay, is this what you thought? I'm going to do this. I mean, most people didn't even know this job even probably existed. So, what was it that you wanted to be when you were a kid?
So you're right. I definitely didn't know this existed. I didn't know this existed in college. This position. No, as a kid, it's kind of corny. I'd say I was a nerdy kid. Like I was very studious. Had the big Coke bottle glasses and things like that. And I was in gifted classes, and we learned about space, and we learned about Alan Shepard and Neil Armstrong and the Challenger explosion. And my name is Alan Scott Ashby. And so I thought I was destined to be an astronaut because NASA. And
Oh,
so for
right.
me, astronaut was the path. And then I read somewhere that you need 20/20 vision. And obviously the Coke bottle glasses didn't fit that. And then I got really big into, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So I did in middle school our Monday, or actually our weekday announcement. So I would be on like a sportscaster, but I was doing the news and would deliver the news of the day for the middle school, and signed off like this, and kind of moved around. And then it was going to be, then I thought lawyer, attorney, and things like that. But no, did I think I'd be overseeing a staffing company? I did not.
Well, I think that almost anybody watching this does find themselves in the same situation. I mean, even to this day, after being a professional speaker and doing keynotes for 20 years, never once did I think that this would be my job. I think that most of us end up in jobs that are the exact, perhaps opposite of what we expected. So I like the ASA, Alan Scott Ashby. So it turns out that I was thinking as you were speaking that for NASA, maybe it means not Alan Scott Ashby.
That could be. That's what it did become. Yes.
Now, did you remember a moment where you found out because of your vision that you actually weren't going to be able to go into outer space? Like, was it a devastating moment?
It was just like okay.
Hmm.
So that was also like right around the fifth grade to sixth grade year, which for any kid going fifth grade to sixth grade is a completely different change. So
Yeah.
I think that with the change of going to middle school, kind of you kind of forget something and you move on to something else. But at
Yeah.
first it was like, okay, so
Yeah.
we're not doing that.
It reminds me of that scene that brought me to tears in that great movie many, many years ago called Little Miss Sunshine, where the kind of teenager son who just doesn't talk and he just hates his parents, and he's sitting in the back of the van on their crazy road trip, and it comes up in conversation that his dream is to become a pilot, and then it also they find out in the same conversation that he's colorblind. And the uncle turns around, not even thinking, says, "Oh, well, if you're colorblind, you can't be a pilot." And you could just the van stops on the side of the highway. He gets out and he just screams ahead of his top of his head. Finally, the first time this teenager talks, I think, in the whole movie is when he finds out that he can't become a pilot. And for me, my story of that was growing up, and I think it was taking history lessons, and I discovered, you have to put this into context. I was Canadian. I still am Canadian. Um, but I found out you can't be president of the United States unless you're born in the United States. And I was really upset for like the rest of the
Oh
day.
wow. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know where the hell I thought I was going to become president of the United States, but I was like, oh, I guess it was just this idea like there was an avenue, a potential avenue was now cut off to me. And so, anyways, I can tell you, I feel your pain, Alan. So that's great, though. Obviously, you've done well for yourself. Now, back to your childhood, though. There you are, the kid with the Coke bottle glasses, and thinking you're going to be the next Neil Armstrong. What was it about your childhood in general that you cherished? What was it something about your childhood that you just look back on and just puts a big smile on your face?
So I will tell you, I light up about this. So my grandparents, which were on my dad's side, they had a 13-acre farm in South Georgia. And I spent many a Sundays after church there. I spent many a summers there. And it was just, I mean, it was where you could go be a kid. I mean, they had an old rusty barn. It wasn't like, get a little daring there. My cousins and my family would be there, and we'd be riding four-wheelers and playing volleyball and just kind of being a kid. And it felt like the biggest place. I mean, 13 acres is not a big farm,
Hmm.
but it felt like, I mean, it felt like massive at the time. And the freedom it gave me as a kid to kind of just get out there and be a boy and be a kid and just explore and do things. It was that was something that was really amazing.
It's funny when you say that because I sometimes genuinely feel sad for individuals who didn't have that kind of exposure growing up. No fault of their own. Maybe they grew up in the concrete jungle of a big city. But I had a similar childhood to you where I grew up in a small town, 7,500 people on a lake, and I learned how to swim in a river.
Yeah.
And that was just normal for every other kid in my town. We would get on our bikes, go down to the beach. There was a forest across the street. We would go in and swim in ponds, come out with leeches and a couple of frogs in our hands. And I genuinely believe I had one of the greatest childhoods that a child can have. And, it makes me think today, I know you have kids. Do you find yourself trying to replicate that for your own children, knowing the impact it had on you, or is it a case where maybe you live in a place that it's not as easy?
It's definitely not as easy where I live. I live in the suburbs of Atlanta,
Hmm.
but I think like there are certain things that I'm like, maybe we pushed the needle too far. I mean, there was one instance that my best friend and I, like, one was on a four-wheeler, the other were on roller skates, and we were pulling each other down the road. So I don't know that I'm ready to let my kids go do that. Like, and obviously no one wore bicycle helmets, like when they rode their bikes back then. I mean, you didn't do that.
No.
But no, like what I like to do and what I think like I learned about my childhood and kind of how I apply it to my kids now is I want them to be exposed to a lot of things, but I also want to feed into their passions. And so, for instance, my middle son Maverick loves dinosaurs. I mean, he's taught me more about dinosaurs than I could imagine. We've watched all the Jurassic Parks. I learn a new dinosaur every day. Um, and he's in fifth grade, and it's like, okay, like dinosaurs, like what are we doing here? But I like to feed into that and just see the passion they have and encourage them to try things. And my oldest son, who's actually my stepson, I I felt like I was never like led down a path or like kind of like, hey, here's your passion, go. It was more like this is what we're doing. And so my wife and I were very big into kind of with guardrails, pushing it and leading down the path that our kids are more passionate about. Because like I've got an older son, like I was saying, who is 21. Um, it was evident he wasn't the most studious kid in school. Like, I mean, if you put him in a math class, like he's like, okay, get me out of here, English. Good luck getting him to read the book. But he showed an early interest in cars and automotive.
Hmm.
And we had, I remember when he was a junior in high school, we had a talk with him. We're like, you know what? let's think through this. Let's talk through this passion. Like, is this a fad? Is this something you see on YouTube? Is this really like something you want to pursue? And in the conversation, it made more sense for us and to him. 4-year college for you is not like the path for you, and it's not
Yeah.
the path for everyone. Like, if you truly love automotive, like the best thing you can do is get experience right out of high school, like get in a shop, do technical school. Um, in reality, I really thought he was the first time he got in a shop and got his hands dirty, he was going to be okay. Like that was cool on YouTube. I don't want to do this.
Right.
But in reality, the more he's been exposed to this, the more he is like, it just lit something up in him. And, I think for us, like we really want to encourage that passion because, you work a long time in your career, right?
Yeah.
And we know a lot of people who aren't in passionate careers, and
Hmm.
we really want to foster that and make sure that they're kind of feeding that piece. So
That's great.
I kind of got off path of your question, but like that
No.
was kind of a pivot from what I would say from my childhood, though.
Right. Yeah. So you saw kind of, an area where you wanted to improve upon your own childhood. And I can relate to that. I come from immigrant parents who came to the country of Canada with $150 in their pocket. And so for them, the conversation was always the same. Like, listen to the three boys that they had. You just have to go to college or university, get a degree, get a good job, marry someone, have a couple of kids, and then you've done everything that's important in life.
Yeah.
And while that's, great advice, of course, and it can bring a great deal of joy, nowhere was it, hey, by the way, like, what do you like? What are you interested in? And let's see if there's ways that we can, harness that and foster that. And the one thing I will say, though, that stuck with me, my father used to say, I don't care if you want to become a garbage man. He said, you will find a way to make lots of money if you are passionate about what you do. And so there was this kind of juxtaposition between one messaging and the other. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think, the other one won out. But I think that's so great because I'm a big believer that if you start anywhere, anywhere is still a place and anywhere will lead you everywhere. And for your son getting into automotive, he goes in and his first thought is, okay, I'm going to get my hands greasy. I'm going to be fixing cars. And then somewhere along the way, a year down the road, he has a conversation with somebody and he starts getting into the idea of car rims. Like I know that's a big industry, rims for cars, and
Oh yeah.
he's specializing in that. And he thinks, oh, you know what? I like that more now. But he wouldn't have led himself to that had he not had the conversation. He wouldn't have the conversation if he didn't dive into something he was passionate about. And so you just got to like throw yourself into something you're passionate about and not worry about whether it's going to lead you to your end game, but to realize that it'll lead you to your next conversation, which leads you to eventually, where it is that you genuinely want to land. So he's lucky to have you.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that and kind of building off of that, like I think in leadership, and that's one thing I've learned over the years in leading people. My job is to clear heads and to put people in the place that they can be the most successful. And sometimes that means having tough conversations with people who are maybe not in a place that they're aligned. And I've had those conversations, and we've had those conversations about what they're really good at, what they're passionate about, and then realigning their roles, and then they flourish. And so I think what's the quote? Everybody would have thought Einstein was an idiot if we'd have told him, or Einstein said, if you judge the squirrel by how good he swims or something like that, like
Right.
you would
Yeah.
think he's like. So you got to kind of like, people are creative for a reason, and they've got those innate things. So I think it's important to foster that.
I agree with you. I agree with that. So now, if you go back though, from the time that you were having this great childhood, growing up, half the time on the farm and being a boy, and I just love that visual of like an ATV pulling somebody on roller skates. That's right up my alley. We did all that kind of stuff too. Um, but now that you're an adult and you're a grown man, you've got a family, when you look back, what would you say was one of your better decisions that you had made in order to bring yourself to the life that you want to have?
So I was and I would say early on, like I think when it came time for college and it came time for those conversations, I think I was a really good baseball player, a really good athlete. But I'm 5'9". I was not going professional baseball, and
Mm.
so I had junior college offers to go play baseball. And coming from a town of 163 and or graduating 163 people, I made a choice. I was like, I love baseball. I still coach baseball. Still watch baseball, but like maybe junior college is not the path for me, and I chose to go to a bigger university. And really the reasoning behind that was like I wanted exposure to other cultures. I wanted exposure to other people. I really needed to get out there and make some mistakes, and
Yes.
made a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it was a tough choice. And I mean, some days I look back and I'm like, I should have done this and that, but I do think it led me to where I am today, like because I made that choice versus the other.
Right. I'm thinking a lot more these days in terms of forks in the road. As cliche as it sounds, we've seen it in every movie, but it is something that I'm now realizing. I guess perhaps you come to a certain age in your life where you look back and you can now see a series of forks in the road where you could have gone one way or the other. And neither one perhaps is necessarily bad, but the one that you did choose definitely led you to more of what it is that you were wanting from life. And when you talk about sports, that seems to be just such a big topic of conversation these days amongst parents, where everyone thinks their kid is going to be the next pro athlete, right?
Yeah.
And living these very unrealistic, delusional, I would say, lives with respect to the amount of time and effort that they're going to put into that. And I think most people hadn't, being given the attention you were given for baseball. No, I think 95% of people would say, "Oh my gosh, I just have to. Maybe I'll be the needle in the haystack and I'll get through." So it must have been difficult for you to say no to those opportunities.
I think the external pressure from like my high school baseball coach, I mean, we were really, and my parents and things like not going that route was a tough one.
Yeah.
Um, but the cerebral side of me was like, I did the math and it was one of those things like once I came to the decision, it was no looking back. It wasn't like sit there and be somber over the decision. It really was like, is this the path? And in reality, in certain ways, I wouldn't let that door open because I knew if I'd have let that door open a little bit, then the decision would have been made for me. So I had to
Right.
put some hard, stiff arms up early in that decision to make sure that I went the other way.
Good
So.
for you. So then, when you think about that, do you think that we live a life based on fate, or do you think it's more about free will? Was that just your plan? Was that you were going to go that route, or do you think it's more free will?
So I think we are all like when I would say fate, and I think it's a mixture of both. And I know that's a cop out answer, but I do think
Right.
it's a mixture of both. We are all innately given, like God given, just like talents that we are pre-wired to be the best at certain things, right? And
Hmm.
so that's a matter of fate.
Right.
But it's the free will into how much do you lean into that, how much do you feed into that, the choices you're talking about, the fork in the road. That's where the free will comes into play. So
Mm.
you have it there. And there are paths and there are choices that you make, choices that come with good consequences, choices that come with bad consequences. But I do think, when we were talking about forks in the road and the free will piece, like one thing that I have learned, and because I've made a lot of bad choices too,
Yeah.
paid the consequences.
Right there with you.
Um, who you're naturally meant to be, there's always a path back there, right? So no matter the choices that you've kind of gone and how far off the path you've gotten, there are choices back to who you truly are meant to be, with some self reflection and just kind of just some discipline and things like that. So
I agree with you there because I knew that for me as a child growing up, that I just felt inclined to be in the public sphere on some level, whether it was going to be on stage or film or television or as maybe a radio DJ, or just even behind the scenes as a writer. I just felt like I was going to be having some sort of creative outlet. And as I look back in my life, I can see what I would consider to be maybe even decisions that I regret not either doing or doing that took me away from going down what could have been a really great path in the world of, let's say, entertainment. And then yet, for some reason, no matter what, I still kind of came back to the world of the public eye. One that comes to mind is that I was offered this job to be a TV personality, but it was a very, very small local TV station. And they I think couldn't even pay. And my ego
That's
was
the best
bruised.
job.
I love those. I still get those. And my ego was bruised. And I thought, no, I'm somebody. And I've often looked back and wondered if I had taken that and then perhaps been seen by another bigger TV station and then from there leapfrogged up and up and up. But of course, I don't give it much thought because, life is
Yeah.
2020, isn't it, when you look back? But I do believe that it didn't lead me down the path of becoming something completely different, such as, let's say, an accountant, for example. So I do agree that we are meant to go down certain paths, and we can't deny that. Speaking of which, though, I would imagine though that you had the courage to make some good decisions in the process. You've made some bad decisions, like we all have, but. Where would you, when you look back, is there a point in your life where you would say you took a major pivot? And I'm sure you've had many, but is there one that comes to mind? And if so, what did you learn from that experience?
So it's funny. My prior company before I came to Sinet, I was there for 16 years, but it was 2 8-year periods, right? So there was a 1 year break in between.
Right.
And I had started with the company when it was very small, um, ramped up in the company and grew in the company, became their number one salesperson, started leading teams. And I still always had this like just itch in the back of in the back of my mind, like this isn't the right path, right? So I was a risk management and insurance major. I was going to do underwriting and then become a risk manager. The first company I interviewed with, 6 interviews and 2.5 hour interviews and things like that. We're like, Alan, you're not an underwriter. We're sorry. You're a salesperson. So start this over. So I did sales for them in insurance and did really well. I just kind of stumbled into my last career, but I was halfway into working there and I've set these records and I've done these things. And I was like, I'm meant to be back in insurance. Like I've got this knack that I want to go run a business. And so I left, and resigned and, took a set and just took a shot and went all in, made no money. It was all commission only. So made zero money that year with financial planning, but it was one of the best years, in reality. It was a great time. I had really young kids then, so I was able to be there for my wife to help her through some of that. I was able to grow professionally, personally. I did some self development and self improvement there. I was able to foster some relationships and friendships that had kind of been dying because I was working so much. And I was able to go all in and scratch that itch and realize quickly, this is not the path for me.
Right. Yes.
But it was good because like, I think if I had not done that, I would have always had that in the back of my mind and it would have been just like a weight that's kind of pulling you back. And so I returned to my prior industry and kind of took off from there. But I don't think that would have happened without kind of taking that step back. And people thought I was crazy. Like,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it was really good. And I look back on it favorably. So.
So when you took a stab, didn't go the way perhaps the way you planned, went back into the industry, what was that like for you psychologically? Because I say this as someone who has had many periods in my life where I've done the same thing, where I kind of go all in on a bet and the bet doesn't go the way that I had planned. And there's a part of me that is a bit afraid to go back to my community, back to my world, back to my family, and kind of with my tail between my legs and say, hey, you know what? Turns out I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, or that I wasn't as talented. And I hate feeling that way because I know that I grew so much in making that decision in the first place, and so it's silly for me to beat myself up over it. What was it like for you? Did you beat yourself up a little bit?
So it was hard because like when I returned, I wasn't where I was at. So that humble pie of starting back over, not completely, but starting over.
Hmm.
There was stigma at my company, like, oh, you left, like you're a flight risk, right? And there was always that stigma, even 8 years later there, like I was still living and fighting through that. So I felt like what it did with me is one, it was kind of it was discouraging because I'm not where I was before, and now I've got to fight my way back to where I was. And so I felt like I had to overprove myself.
Mm,
which is not a great place to be and not something I'd recommend. Like you got to kind of like let it work. Um, and there were definitely times in like 8 years after that I would still look back and like, what if I just wouldn't have made that decision? I mean, like
right.
we know it was the right decision. We know it got us back to the right place, but like, what if I had just powered through? Like, where would things be today? And like, I
Hmm.
think that's the hard part is like, you kind of look back at those decisions and you go like, because the decision you make today, you see 3, 4, 5 years down the road, right? Like most decisions, like especially big decisions, the impact doesn't follow 6 months later.
Hmm.
It's down the road, and which is why it's so important to be purposeful with like how you're living. But like I never get, I'll be honest, I never got rid of that feeling of like, why did I do that? Like I know it was great. Like what could have been?
Yeah.
You kind of look at your bank account sometimes and you're like, oh my gosh, like a whole
Yeah.
year of not getting paid, like
Yeah.
how that impacted things.
Hmm.
So I don't, it wasn't easy. Like
Yeah.
honestly, and when I reached out to come back, it wasn't easy either.
Hmm.
And in pure honesty, I wasn't going to go back to my old company because I was ashamed to kind of reach out and say,
Yeah.
hey, I failed.
Yeah.
I didn't do it.
Totally.
Luckily I did, but I was definitely ashamed to kind of make that call at first.
Well, first of all, kudos to you for having the guts to even say that out loud because I would feel the exact same way. I would just be like, my ego would be too big, and I'm just gonna like, I will go work, I will be a greeter at Walmart before I go back to my company. And yet, there is something so special about having had that experience still because you know yourself more deeply because of it, I'm guessing. And I'm guessing that you just um, probably will be able to even parent differently when your own children come to their own crossroads that are similar to that, as they will. And for you to say, hey, you know what? I took a year off one time. It didn't go the way I planned. I lost a little chunk of change in the way, but guess what? I survived and I'm still alive. And look at the great life our family has had, and to give your own child the confidence to be able to make those decisions as well, and to know it's okay if it doesn't work out.
Well, the one thing I can say that I take from that, and even like the pivot that I've made recently, and all pivots is growth isn't linear, right? Like everybody wants this, and especially today, like they want the growth, not the growth like this, they want the growth like this, right?
Yeah.
And like growth isn't linear, and you can't grow while you're in a positive like state. Like the growth happens in those hard, gritty, just persevering, trying areas of life, and like it's easy. Like growth doesn't happen in comfort, and so without some of that non-linearity and without like getting into some of those pits and kind of having to fight through and look yourself in the mirror after you make a really, really bad mistake
Yeah.
and realize, hey, we got to fix this type thing. There is no growth. And so I think that would be the saddest thing is like to look back at the end of life and go, I stayed here. I made a lot of money, but, I'm not better off than I was when I, started this. So I
Yeah.
think that's a scary thing for a lot of people though.
It is. It is because especially when you start having responsibilities, and I think that as men, we may feel, I want to be careful of saying this out loud. I'm going to say this to any person who's watching. I've not made any conclusions on what I'm about to say, but perhaps there is that greater level of pressure for us to take the path that is going to, in the eyes of society, provide the most money or have the greatest title on our business card or give us the greatest status within our communities, even though it isn't what's going to lead us to the greatest amount of growth or to the greatest amount of risk in order to expand ourselves. And that's where we have to really look ourselves in the mirror, I guess, and say, hey, look, who am I going to be in the eyes of other people if I don't take this risk? One of my favorite things that I remember hearing about was a friend of mine was at a wedding. And you know how weddings almost invariably they always end up getting a big like circle around like the bride and the groom. they're dancing, and of course, the bride and the groom will go and they'll grab somebody and they bring them into the circle, and the whole crowd is cheering them on while they're doing their dance moves, and they'll pull somebody else in. Well, this one woman I know was pulled into the dance floor, and she did one of those, oh no, 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 not me, not me, and she slinked back into the thing, but kept on clapping for everyone else. And then the bride went to her a little bit later on, tried to pull her into the dance floor. She's like, no, 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 no. And when she came back the second time, one of her friends standing next to her whispered in her ear and she said, your children are watching. And it was just like this light bulb went off. And she realized you're teaching your kids, don't take a risk, don't make yourself look silly, don't perhaps not be the best compared to the other dancers in the circle. And as soon as she had that light switch go off, she went, boom, right in the middle of the dance floor and just shook it down and made a fool of herself and had fun. And I think that that is something that it's not even with respect to teaching our children these types of things, but teaching our colleagues and teaching our friends and teaching our neighbors when they watch us take these risks, even if we fail, we're teaching them something along the way, and it's never not empowering.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
They watch and they observe, and it's not what you say, it's what you do, and it's
Yeah.
never more true than with your kids.
It reminds me of something that my friend Alan Cross, who's a pretty famous Canadian radio host, and one time I asked him to speak at an event, and he said to the audience, he says, one thing I will tell you is this: the person who dies with the most stories wins. And so even those stories of failure, they're still stories. And I'm always way more interested in your story of the year where you didn't make a dollar compared to the year when you made a lot of money. I'm always way more interested in the one that you didn't. I always want to I have 1,000 questions about that. And speaking of which, what when you think about stories of your life, what's one of your favorite stories to tell? What's a good story that comes up for you from time to time that maybe you don't even get a chance to share that often?
Well, we've already covered the four wheeler with the rollerblades, but no, this was a time in high school, and like I said, like I was a great baseball player. We were on a really good team, and we were in the regional playoffs. So I'm a catcher. We have a doubleheader that day. I had been, I had grit, determination, all of this stuff had been like just poured in my head. And then I'm like, this is the playoffs. Like we've got a shot. Let's go. So, I'm the catcher again. One of my best friends who actually lives right down the street from me now. We play tennis together, which is crazy because we're not in the same hometown anymore. He's playing first base, and I'm a very type A person. He's a very go with the flow guy. And
Okay.
so he has his own pace. He always gets there and he's really successful. I look up and there's a pop up in between first and home and it's in foul play. So I look over and he's not going after it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's not going to catch, like we need to catch this ball. So I just take off from the catcher's position and I'm sprinting and I do a head first dive looking up like this and I go straight after this ball. Well, that ended with a major collision, like face first into his hip. And he's a big dude, 6'3", 280 pounds. So I ended up breaking my nose. I broke my hand. I'm knocked out. I'm bleeding. I don't think this would fly today just because like we'd be able to feel it, but I don't remember the rest of the game, but I stayed in catching, called the next game. Kind of fought through it. We ended up winning the series, ended up going to the state championship and everything. But it was one of those deals where it would have been really easy to come out. But it was more of this is for the team. I've got to stay in there. Like this is the playoffs. I look back on it like him and I still joke about it because he's like, yeah, my hip still hurts from that. And like 25 years later, but
You must be so proud of yourself though that you didn't give up and you kept going.
yeah, no, it was maybe if I could have remembered in the moment, but
Mhm.
we didn't have
Yeah.
the concussion protocols then. But no, I am like I try to teach that to my kids. Obviously, if they're injured, they're coming off the field. But I
Sure.
coach my one son in lacrosse, and I was like, there's a difference between pain and injury, right? And
Right.
so there's going to be some tough times. You're playing a contact sport. Um, And so I think it's important to like kind of teach especially in team sports, like there are times you got to kind of fight through some things, right? For the betterment of the team, kind of put the team
Right.
in front of you. Obviously if you're hurt, that's one thing, but, I think sports can just teach you so many things. So.
Do you feel like in business, have you noticed the same type of thing where there are people who don't seem to be able to differentiate between, let's call it pain and injury, which is, if you're having an extremely difficult period of time, yeah, don't go to work. If you are sick, really sick, don't go to work. On the flip side of that, been amazed at how many people I've met in business who the slightest tickle in their throat and they're out for the week. Or, they stub their toe and like, I can't keep going. Like they're just turning to complete snowflakes at the slightest thing. And I feel like we used to have more grit. Is this something that you've noticed?
So I've seen, I can honestly say I may have seen the opposite recently, and I don't know if it's from COVID, but I've seen people where I'm like, you have to get out of the office, like you're infecting everybody. Like go home.
Right.
And maybe it's the industry I'm in, and it's like staffing positions, and it's so high paced, and if you're not there, it's a big deal. Um, but what I've noticed though, as far as the grit goes and things like that, it's not the working through if you have like a sniffle or pollen season, which we're going through now in Georgia. It's the grit to fight through the process, right? So when I was talking about everybody wants the growth like this versus this, and everybody wants to be the guy at the top of that, or the girl at the top of that, and they look, but they're not really looking at like what those people did to get there. And so what I'm noticing and where I'm seeing a lot of challenges, the grit to fight through and do the small little things that matter on a habitual basis and just do the small things. You're not going to see the results from this, but do the small things and fight through it. And it eventually snowballs into that growth that you want to get to. But I think it's the iPhone or the internet or chat GPT or whatever, like they want the instant gratification, and there is no instant gratification when it comes to building a business or building a sales profile or even like if you're not in production and you're on the operational side, there is no instant gratification to being in leadership, right? Like the first time the first time I was in leadership, I was not prepared to be in leadership. And that probably also contributed a little bit to me taking the hiatus between in the step back. I wasn't prepared, and I was in it for the wrong motivations and the wrong whys. And I just was like, well, I'm the best seller. I can do this. And there was some maturity and some EQI and some other things that had to happen. But I don't know, like that's a long answer to your question, but like I do feel like I've missed that. Like, all right, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, and they did an interview or not interview, sorry, they did a study not too long ago on high school students asking them what it is that they want to be when they grow up. And I think I remember reading it was 1 in 4 of them saying that they wanted to become a YouTube star. And so you have this generation, and I don't think it's just the younger generation, but people so often they want the success, they want the accolades, they want the crystal clear, beautiful retirement, and yet they don't want to put in the really minute details and effort into getting there. I mean, if I had a dollar for every single time I had somebody who came up to me after seeing one of my keynotes at a corporate environment asking if I'd have a coffee with them or a Zoom call with them so that they could pick my brain on how to become a professional speaker. And I do it. I try to help the best that I can. But eventually, I realized I did it so often that it occurred to me the people, when I would give them the step by step details of what they had to do to get there, you could just see the blood draining from their face because
Yeah.
they didn't want to put all that effort in. And they're like, "Oh, no, no, I thought I could just, 6 months, I could be where you are." And I'm like, "No, no, no. There are things that I'm doing on stage, whether it's just the flick of my eye or the way I stand, that took me 20 years of
Yeah.
getting it wrong to learn." And so, I can't just teach this to you over the course of a 30-minute Zoom call. But everyone wants to get it fast.
So I think a lot of people look at Mr. Beast, right? 25, 26 years old. I'm worth $1.5 billion. What they don't see is Mr. Beast at 12 years old, constantly filming videos, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, like constant video footage,
Yeah.
constant trial and error, constant like pushing it out there. Like
Mhm.
they see the end result, but they're not looking back at the hours that went into this. I mean, they see the Beatles, right? But they
Yeah.
don't see the Beatles playing at this one club, this adult club for years to perfect their craft before they became the Beatles and the Beatle invasion. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I think social media just kind of highlights that with the highlight reels and everything else. So.
It's so true. It's so true. And this is why I think though it's important to get a great mentor, to get great teachers, so that they can show you what it is that they've gone through, and if you're willing to do what they have told will tell you to do, you can go anywhere. And so, speaking of which, for yourself, then I'm guessing you've had many teachers, many mentors, many people who've influenced your life. I like to ask this question sometimes. Is there anyone that has played that role in your life who perhaps you miss today and maybe you wish they could be around to turn to ask them for their advice, or someone that did teach you things, or maybe it wasn't any of that, but what would it be that you miss about them?
So this is apparent to me. It's my grandfather,
Okay.
and he was a father to me, like he was a leader to me. He was a comedian to me. What I loved about him is he was the most dry sense of humor guy. I mean, like he was ex-military and then went on and worked in the correctional facility as a sergeant and actually led this 90-day boot camp. So he went at 45 years old to Quantico, Virginia to do Marine boot camp, then come back and teach it to help prisoners like kind of rehab and get out of jail sooner and things like that. And he's a drill sergeant. So he's just like serious guy,
Yeah.
but he had the biggest heart and he knew when to lead. He knew when to push. He knew when to direct. He knew when to listen. And it's funny, like I feel like when I talk about the farm and the memories of the farm and all of my family there, like the passing of him, it was, I don't think we realized it was going to happen. And he battled like glioblastoma for 2 years. So we knew he was going to pass.
Hmm.
But I don't think any of us really and understood the impact it was going to have on the family and how critical him being kind of the glue holding things together would be. And so I'd love to be able to pick his brain today. I'd love to be able to go call him and, like he would shoot you straight. That, and I think I get some of my directness from him on like, hey, like the compliment sandwich is not the place to be always, right? It's sometimes people just need to hear it,
Yeah.
hear the feedback directly so it's clear. But I'd love to be able to call him. Yeah, he was one that like, I mean, yes,
Do you ever talk to him in your mind and like try asking him, say, I'm in this situation and like I'd love to get your advice, and just to kind of almost imagine what he might say?
gosh, I haven't done that, but like I may have to try that. That's
It's an amazing thing. I ask because it's something that I've learned to do in my life. I lost my best friend last year to leukemia, and I just was so frustrated of not being able to speak to him because we would just talk and laugh our heads off. And so I will just reach out to him. And I'll just say, "Hey, Paul, like, what do you think about this?" Or sometimes I actually laugh with him about things. Like I say the joke, and I know what he would say back, and so we still get to joke around with each other. It's a pretty phenomenal thing because deep down, I think that we all possess this really incredible knowledge about people, and especially the ones that we had time with on planet Earth. And so, from that perspective, we probably know more of what they would say or the advice that they would give than we ever give ourselves credit for. So
yeah.
it's a fun exercise. Try it. Hey, listen, what do you think happens when we die? Speaking of people passing, do you think he's still around?
I do. I'm a Christian. We just had Easter holiday, and we know what that all means for everybody. And like I do believe like it, Christians go to heaven. Like I think there's the afterlife there. I think there's just too much evidence out there for even if you're not a Christian. I think there's just too much evidence of the afterlife and other religions and just people's encounters and things like that. So I don't think Earth is the end game.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm with you there.
I think it's kind of a journey to kind of get you to the next place. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's something I wish people would be willing to have more conversations about, in the sense that, especially people who have had near-death experiences and what they've seen, and it just seems so consistent with so many people, the warmth and the love and the light and the voices and reuniting with family members. And yet here we are talking about what Kim Kardashian had for lunch. I mean, between the two conversations, I think there's something that's a
yeah.
lot more fantastic. So because you believe there is an afterlife, and you see it through the eyes of your religion, do you also feel that there is a meaning to life? And if so, what would you say it is?
It's a good question. Um, I honestly think, I think, I think we are like when going back to the fate and free will and things like that. I think we're all kind of connected more than everybody leads on. I mean, especially with the divisiveness of the country and the divisiveness of the world and everything else. Like we're all like one body and all connected in certain ways. And I think it's for us to use our gifts and use our purposes and to betterment to the betterment of others, right? And so I think like where we have it backwards and why there's so much divisiveness right now is there's a very self-centered nature, and that isn't the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to learn how to love others and serve others and kind of build others up. And it's hard, right? Because but I do think it's meant to be like finding your purpose and leading others and kind of serving others and going for that. Like it's not a great answer, but
That's an awesome
it's
answer.
it's
That's that's so
it's a
great.
tough question.
Well, it is, right? And the part of, that stops so many of us is our ego says, "Well, who the heck am I supposed to know the answer to that question?" And the truth is that how can anyone deny what you just said? And yet, sadly, it is not something that we actively infuse into our daily lives. There are those incredible people that do, or at least try, but when you look at the divisiveness of the world that we see around us, whether it's the political divisiveness or the national divisiveness, you name it, and you just can't help but roll your eyes and think, guys, we're supposed to love each other, you know? Like that's kind of the end
Yeah.
game here, right? This You didn't think that we all just won this lottery of life, and here we are on planet Earth, and we're gonna fight? That just seems so ridiculous. We should be really getting along.
Well, I think it goes back to if you have an eternal like mindset, right? So um, it's easier to be selfless because if you don't have the eternal, like it's you've got to fight to make this the best you can, and but in reality, what you're doing is creating. You're not getting the life that you're actually after. But like I think having an eternal mindset helps understand, and it helps in some of those pivots and those growing pains and stuff like that. Like yeah, this seems like a long time to me because it's 2 years and whatever. That's nothing in the scape or the scope of eternity. So
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even if you think about it from the amount of time that humans have been around, or the earth has existed, you name it, it's like you're here for this tiny little blip of time.
yeah,
And to think that that's just it. That's all. Oh yeah, I got one ride around on the roller coaster, and that's it. And no, there's got to be so much more. And I think that we experience that so much more when we at least try to live our lives with some sort of meaning. I mean, this is the reason why we created the Human Connection Group, is because we said to ourselves, it's imperative for us to know that we woke up every day to run a business that hacked away at that divisiveness, and that promoted greater inclusion and promoted greater human connection. And even if it doesn't make us gazillions of dollars, we don't care. It's just to know that two people at work might have had a more meaningful conversation that day than if you hadn't made the effort. Is completely gratifying. And in fact, let me lead that into my last question for you before I let you go, because That's what I want for people at work. What do you want? What do you want for the people you lead or for your colleagues when you think about the effort you make as a leader in business?
For them personally, I think and we've talked about it a lot here, but I do think it is getting in alignment with who they are at work and bringing their true selves to work in work, because I do think that's where their best work's going to come. I would love it. It's harder with, I've managed a lot of people right out of college, and they were the first ones to come up, and like the iPhone's been in their life forever. Right. So it's harder to teach that, long-term thinking and things like that. But I do want them to understand and kind of like start learning that longer-term thinking, and not I need this today. Like, hey, Google, what's the answer to this? And now Chat GBT, which can literally write a business plan in 2 minutes. Um, for me personally, like what I would love to be like remembered as, or just seen as a leader. One, it I gave it my all. Like, I mean, that's one thing. Like, I gave it my all. I think there are times that, and fair, because I think there are times that I've made decisions, and people don't always agree with your decisions as leaders, but I do think like they know they're fair, and they know that it's for the best interest of not just them, but all parties and the company and everything else in general. And I really love to see people grow. And so, that if I can look back and see that I helped a lot of people grow, that would be really awesome.
That's awesome. Well, listen, for the very short amount of time I've had to be able to speak with you, there is no doubt about it in my mind that there are many people who have grown quite a bit because of you. And sadly, we're never told, or very rarely are we told, at least. And so, on behalf of those people who haven't told you, let me just let you know that I have no doubt by how authentic you are in the way you've had this conversation with me today, and how much you genuinely care about not just your team, not just about your company, but about your community and about your nation and about the world. That as long as, I guess, you keep showing up as that version of yourself, I think that it would be inevitable that people will grow around you and continue to do so. And I genuinely believe that they will, from listening to you speak today. And I want to thank you for not being afraid to jump onto a call with a stranger and to have a conversation about, parts of your life that maybe you don't always share in public. And it says a lot about you that you did this. So it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today.
No, pleasure's been all mine. I appreciate the invite, and the hour flew by. It was great.
It does go by fast. Look at that, folks. When you're having meaningful human connections, time does fly. It's like, it's
Yeah.
not just a cliche thing. Well, folks, thank you for tuning in to the show today. And we look forward to seeing you check out other podcasts in the future. And until then, remember, keep on making those human connections a part of your life. Lots of love to all of you, and speak to you soon.